The year was 2489 and humanity had finally reached the stars. For centuries, humans had dreamed of joining other civilizations, of proving that they too belonged among the great minds of the galaxy. When they finally entered the galactic concord, they learned a harsh truth. The rest of the galaxy spoke without sound. The Concord was a union of hundreds of alien races, all connected through a shared telepathic network called the Chorus. Every thought, every feeling, every intention flowed freely among them. To speak was to sing inside the mind. To lie was almost impossible. The Chorus made them one, a perfect, endless song, but humans could not join that song. No human brain could connect to the Chorus. They needed words, gestures, expressions, things the other species had long abandoned. In the eyes of the Concord, humanity was silent. Most aliens found that silence uncomfortable, even unsettling. They called humans the voiceless ones. To them, a person without telepathic communication was like a planet without light. Yet among all humans, one man was chosen to represent Earth. His name was Commander Elias Veron. Elias was tall, calm, and always quiet. He spoke little even among his own kind. When others shouted to be heard, Elias listened. When others tried to explain, he simply watched and understood. Some said he had the patience of stone. Others thought him cold. But those who knew him well believed his silence was not emptiness. It was depth. When the Concord invited humanity to send a permanent ambassador, the United Earth Council chose Elias without hesitation. The journey to the Aelari homeworld took 4 standard months. Elias spent the time studying everything he could about the Aelari, a luminous species made of both matter and energy. Their forms shimmered with color, their bodies thin like ribbons of light. Their songs filled the air with vibrations so beautiful that sound itself seemed alive. When Elias arrived, the Aelari greeted him with a wave of glowing sound. The air trembled with emotion, curiosity, pride, and something close to pity. To them, Elias looked heavy and dull, trapped in solid flesh, bound by gravity. Yet when he bowed and smiled, something shifted. He did not try to speak through the Chorus. He did not force words into a place that had no need for them. He only nodded politely and said in slow English, "Thank you for welcoming me." The translator device converted his voice into light patterns that shimmered around him. But it could not translate tone. It could not translate heart. And yet somehow they felt it. Among the crowd stood Seren, the Aelari envoy assigned to assist him. Her body glowed in shades of silver and blue, her voice like 1,000 crystal bells. She was curious about this human who refused to fill the air with sound or thought. Their first days together were full of misunderstanding. Seren spoke in song, her emotions woven into every note. Elias would watch quietly, letting her finish before answering in his slow, careful voice. At first, Seren thought he was slow-minded, perhaps unable to keep up with her rapid, melodic communication. But then she noticed something. Whenever she sang of sadness, his eyes softened. When she spoke of joy, he smiled faintly as if he understood. When she was angry or confused, he didn't try to calm her. He simply stayed with her, present, patient, letting her emotions settle on their own. The Aelari had no word for that kind of empathy. In the Chorus, feelings flowed instantly. They had forgotten what it meant to listen. Days turned into weeks. Elias joined Concord meetings, always quiet, always observing. The other delegates spoke through bursts of telepathic light, their thoughts flying across the chamber like sparks. Elias had no such voice. He simply waited for his translator to catch up, then gave his answer in a few well-chosen words. At first, the others ignored him, but soon they began to realize that Elias's silence had weight. When he finally spoke, his words were clear and steady, untouched by the noise of constant connection. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush. And often what he said was exactly what needed to be said. Seren watched this transformation with growing fascination. In her private moments, she found herself mimicking him, pausing before speaking, allowing quiet to fill the room. She began to feel something strange in that quiet, peace. One night she found Elias sitting alone by the edge of a glass balcony overlooking her city. The Aelari sky was alive with sound, the hum of living crystals, the whisper of starlight. Elias was watching silently, his face calm, his eyes soft. "Do you not feel lonely without the Chorus?" Seren asked, her voice faintly echoing. Elias turned to her. "No," he said softly. Silence isn't loneliness. Sometimes it's home. Serene tilted her head, her light pulsing gently. Your kind lives separated from each other's minds. How do you survive without constant song? He smiled faintly. We learn to listen with more than our ears. We see, we feel, we remember. Maybe that's our kind of song. For the first time in her life, Serene didn't know how to reply. She only sat beside him, watching the silent stars. And though no words passed between them, she felt something stir, an understanding deeper than melody. Weeks later, during a great council gathering, something went wrong. A ripple of energy tore through the telepathic channels. One by one, alien minds went silent. The chorus faltered. The great song of the galaxy stuttered and broke. Panic spread instantly. For beings who had never known isolation, the sudden silence was unbearable. Delegates cried out in confusion, their thoughts colliding in chaos. Ships lost coordination. Orders were lost. Cities flickered in confusion. But Elias, the one who had always lived in silence, remained calm. He stood among the noise and chaos, watching as beings around him struggled to speak with sound for the first time in millennia. He moved among them, helping where he could. He taught them to gesture, to write, to look into each other's eyes instead of into their minds. Serene found herself trembling, her body's light flickering unevenly. I cannot hear them, she said, voice shaking. I cannot feel anyone. I am alone. Elias reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. You're not alone, he said quietly. You can still see me. You can still hear me. Start there. That simple gesture, skin to light, became her anchor. The moment his hand touched hers, she realized something the chorus had hidden for eons, that real connection did not always need to be spoken. Sometimes the strongest link was made in silence. In the days that followed, Elias worked tirelessly to calm the frightened council. Without telepathy, the galaxy seemed broken, but he guided them patiently, showing them how to communicate in new ways. Serene stayed close to him, learning to use sound, to read expressions, to share emotions through action instead of thought. Slowly, she began to understand the human gift, not just words, but meaning, built through time and patience. When the telepathic engineers predicted that the chorus might never fully recover, despair spread. But Elias only said, then maybe it's time the galaxy learned a new kind of harmony. And Serene, standing beside him, realized that humanity's silence was not a weakness. It was a strength, a quiet melody that could survive even when all other voices faded. That night she sang for him, not through telepathy, but with real sound, shaping air the way humans did. Her voice trembled at first, unsure. Elias listened quietly, his eyes shining. When she finished, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The way he looked at her said everything. In that silence, Serene understood something profound. This human did not love through words. He loved through understanding, through presence, through the quiet between breaths. And in that silence, she felt something louder than all the songs of the galaxy. Something that spoke of forever. The silence did not end. Days passed, and still the chorus, the telepathic network that joined the galaxy together, remained broken. The great harmony of minds had vanished, leaving billions of beings cut off from each other for the first time in their lives. The galaxy trembled in confusion. On every world, panic grew. Entire civilizations were built on telepathic communication. Without it, ships crashed, trade collapsed, and cities fell into chaos. Families could no longer feel the thoughts of their loved ones. For the Alari, who had never spoken with mouths before, it was like losing both voice and breath at once. And yet, amid all that confusion, one species remained calm, the humans. They had always lived without the chorus. To them, silence was normal. They still had sound words and gestures. They knew how to lead without thoughts flowing between them. Commander Elias Veron, Earth's quiet ambassador, suddenly found himself surrounded by leaders from every race, each begging for direction. The grand chamber of the conquered, once filled with glowing thoughts, now echoed with frightened voices. Commander Varon, an insectoid leader, clicked in broken speech. How do you live like this? This emptiness, it is unbearable. Elias looked around the room. Dozens of alien faces shimmered in fear. He took a breath, then spoke slowly, his voice steady and low. You are not empty, he said. You are only quiet. Learn to listen again. The stars have always been silent, and yet they shine. The words were simple, but they spread through the room like warmth. The aliens listened, their eyes fixed on him. They had spent so long hearing each other's minds that they had forgotten the meaning of true listening. At his side stood Seren-Ie, the Alari envoy. She had once been a voice of melody and light, a creature of song. Now her light dimmed and her voice trembled. She could barely hold herself together without the chorus's constant hum in her mind. Yet Elias's calm presence was like gravity, steady and grounding. When she stood near him, the silence didn't seem to crush her quite as much. Together, they began to rebuild communication, one sound, one word, one gesture at a time. Elias showed the alien envoys how to use translators and hand signals. He taught them to write messages, to watch body language, to read emotion through the eyes. The lessons were slow, but every day they made progress. Sirene practiced forming spoken words, though her voice cracked and shimmered oddly in the air. The first time she said Elias's name aloud, it came out as a broken whisper of light and sound. Elias, he smiled gently. Perfect, he said. For her, that smile was brighter than any song she had ever heard. As the days turned into weeks, the galaxy slowly adjusted. But the mystery remained. What had silenced the chorus? A group of scientists studied the waves of energy that had destroyed the network. Their findings shocked the council. It was not a storm, one researcher explained. It was a pulse and a signal in from deep space. Something caused it. The idea sent ripples of fear through every species. If it was a weapon, who had built it? And could it strike again? Elias volunteered to help with the investigation. With Serene as his companion, he traveled aboard the research vessel Horizon's Grace, a human-Alari hybrid ship built for exploration. The silence of space felt heavier than before. Normally, Alari ships hummed with mental songs between crew members. Now, only the soft mechanical sounds of the engines filled the air. Elias spent his nights in the observation deck staring at the stars. Serene often joined him. She no longer sang, but her presence was still radiant, a soft silver glow against the blackness. You miss it, Elias said one night, not as a question, but as understanding. Yes, she answered. Without the chorus, I feel like half of myself is missing. I can no longer hear my people, my home. Only my own thoughts echo back. Elias nodded. That's how we've always lived, he said quietly. With only our own minds for company. Maybe that's why we value silence. It's the space where we find ourselves. Serene looked at him with wonder. You live your whole life like this, alone in your own thoughts. And yet you are calm. I'm not calm, Elias said. I've just made peace with the silence. She smiled faintly. Then perhaps you can teach me. He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. After weeks of searching, the Horizon's Grace discovered the source of the signal, a faint energy trail leading toward the edge of the galaxy, where stars burned dim and strange. The scientists were afraid to go further, but Elias insisted. If this storm returns, he said, the galaxy will fall into chaos again. We have to find out who or what did this. Serene refused to let him go alone. I am Alari, she said firmly. The chorus was born on my world. If something is trying to destroy it, I must see it with my own eyes. Their ship entered the dark region known as the Silent Veil, a sector where communication signals were faint and distorted. There they found something no one had expected, an enormous machine half buried in the remains of a dead moon. It pulsed faintly, releasing waves of invisible energy. The readings matched the pulse that had destroyed the chorus. It's alive, Serene whispered. Or it was once. Elias studied the structure carefully. It wasn't built by any known species. The walls were engraved with patterns older than history itself. They sent the data back to the council, but before a reply could come, the machine activated again. A blinding pulse shook the ship and every system went dark. The crew lost contact instantly. Lights flickered, alarms wailed, and all voices, in both spoken and transmitted, were swallowed by silence. Elias grabbed Serene's hand. Emergency power. Manual control, he shouted, but no sound came from her lips. The pulse had disrupted even their voices. Sound itself seemed to die in the air. In that eerie, airless stillness, Elias and Serene moved through the dim corridors of the ship. guided only by emergency lights. They could not speak, but they could still see each other. Their communication was reduced to looks, gestures, and trust. At one point, Serene slipped as the ship tilted, and Elias caught her just in time. Their eyes met, human brown to Alari silver. For a moment, everything else vanished. In that look was everything they could not say. Don't be afraid. I'm here. They reached the central control room. The alien machine loomed outside the viewport, its surface pulsing like a heartbeat. Elias typed commands into the console, trying to analyze its pattern. It responded to movement, to emotion, and as if it were sensing them. Serene placed her glowing hands on the glass. The patterns changed, flickering faster. It's listening to me, she mouthed silently. Elias frowned. He typed another command, trying to stabilize the readings. The machine began to project images, not words, but memories, of galaxies long gone, of beings made entirely of light, and of a song that once echoed across the universe before the chorus even existed. It wasn't an attack. It was a memory. The machine was ancient, a remnant of a civilization that had tried to connect every living mind in harmony, but in their final days their own network had collapsed, drowning them in madness. They had left this machine behind, a warning, and a test. Only those who could survive silence without losing themselves would be worthy to sing again. As the vision faded, the ship's systems flickered back to life. Sound returned slowly, like the first breaths after drowning. Serene looked at Elias, her light trembling. It was never meant to destroy us, she said softly. It wanted to remind us that we must learn to live apart before we can live as one. Elias nodded. Then maybe humanity was the reminder the galaxy needed. For the first time in weeks, Serene smiled. Not a sad smile, but one filled with understanding. Your silence, she said, has saved us more than once. He only shrugged. Sometimes silence speaks loud enough. When they returned to the Concord, Elias and Serene were greeted as heroes. The chorus slowly began to rebuild, weaker but wiser. Many species started to adopt human communication, learning to speak, to write, to listen. And among them, Serene was the first to teach an Alari child to speak with her voice. Not her mind. As for Elias, he never sought glory. He stayed in the background, helping others learn patience, understanding, and peace in silence. But those who knew his story whispered of the human who had taught the galaxy that sometimes the quietest hearts echo the loudest truths. The galaxy began to heal. Weeks had passed since Commander Elias Veron and Serene returned from the Silent Veil. The mysterious machine that had silenced the chorus was now quiet, no longer sending destructive pulses across the stars. Communication was slowly returning, and the Concord races were learning new ways to speak. Through sound, through writing, and through the lessons humanity had given them. For a time, it seemed peace had returned, but peace never lasts forever. One night, while Elias stood at the edge of the observation deck on the Concord station, the alarms began to ring again. The stars outside the glass suddenly dimmed, one by one, as if the galaxy itself were holding its breath. Serene rushed to his side, her luminous form flickering with worry. It's happening again, she said, her voice trembling. The chorus is fading. Everywhere. Elias turned to her, calm but firm. Then the machine didn't stop it completely. The new readings showed something terrifying. Deep within the silent veil, a second pulse was forming, much larger than before. If it released, it would erase every telepathic connection across the galaxy permanently. Sarah and I looked at Elias. We must go back. He nodded once. We will. They departed aboard a small vessel, the Starling, built for only 2 passengers. The journey to the Silent Veil took several days. The stars grew thinner as they traveled, fewer lights, more emptiness. Inside the ship, the silence between them was not cold. It was calm, like the quiet between heartbeats. Serene watched Elias as he worked, steady hands, sharp eyes, always composed. He never needed to fill the air with words. His presence was enough. Once she asked softly, "Do you ever wish you could speak like us? With thoughts instead of sound?" Elias paused, looking at the endless black outside. "Sometimes," he said. "But if I did, maybe I'd forget how to listen." Serene smiled faintly. "You've taught me that silence can be a kind of song." He looked at her, his expression gentle. And you've taught me that sound can still hold peace. When the starling reached the silent veil, space itself seemed darker than before. The ancient machine they had discovered was now fully awake, glowing with harsh white energy. It pulsed like a dying star, sending ripples through the void. The readings on their instruments were unstable. No communication signal could pass through. Even their voices began to distort, the air vibrating strangely. Elias realized the truth. The storm is coming from the heart of the machine. Serene's light flickered. If we destroy it, the chorus will die forever. But if we do nothing, it will still destroy itself, and everything else with it. He looked at her. Then we'll go inside. We'll find another way. They entered the machine through a massive breach in its outer hull. Inside, the corridors were endless and silent. The walls glowed faintly, pulsing with strange symbols that seemed alive. Every step echoed like a whisper in a cathedral. Soon, even the hum of their ship behind them disappeared. There was only silence. Deep, absolute silence. The deeper they went, the more the machine seemed to respond to their emotions. When Serene's fear grew, the lights flickered wildly. When Elias placed his hand on the wall and closed his eyes in calm focus, the light steadied. It reacts to feeling. Serene realized. It feeds on emotion. Maybe that's how the ancient builders powered it, Elias said. Their harmony kept it alive. But when fear took over, it turned destructive. They finally reached the core chamber, a vast sphere of light suspended above a pit of shadows. In the center floated a glowing crystal heart, pulsing with waves of energy. Each pulse sent faint tremors through their bodies. Serene touched her chest, pain flashing in her light. It's too strong. It's resonating with me. Elias stepped closer, studying the patterns in the air. It's searching for connection, for minds to join, but there's no one left to guide it. Then we must guide it, she whispered. He turned to her sharply. If we connect to it, it might destroy us, she met his gaze. If we don't, it will destroy everyone else. For a long moment, Elias said nothing. The silence between them was heavy, full of everything they didn't need to speak aloud. Fear, trust, love, and the acceptance that some things are worth any cost. Finally, he said softly, then we'll do it together. Serene nodded. Her glow softening, she reached out her hand and he took it. Flesh and light, two forms, two worlds, connected in the calm before the storm. They stepped closer to the crystal heart. It reacted instantly, blazing with light. Energy surged around them, and for a moment the world disappeared. They stood in a vast space made of memory and thought. It wasn't real, but it felt alive. A dream within the machine. Voices echoed all around them, whispers from a civilization long gone. The voices spoke not in words, but in emotion. Sorrow, regret, longing. They showed flashes of their downfall, how their perfect harmony had turned into madness when no one dared to be silent anymore. Every mind screamed to be heard until their world drowned in noise. Elias understood. The machine wasn't a weapon, it was a lesson. It had tried to restore balance by creating silence, forcing minds to rest. But without guidance, it went too far. Serene looked at Elias, her silver eyes filled with light. It needs peace, not destruction. He nodded slowly. Then give it peace. The machine's energy grew violent, waves of soundless force shaking the ground. Serene's glow flickered as the current tried to pull her in. Elias stepped forward, placing his hands on the crystal. It burned like fire, but he didn't move away. He closed his eyes, letting go of every fear, every thought, every sound. He filled his mind with one thing: stillness. Serene followed his lead, placing her hand beside his. Together they stood in silence, no words, no fear, only calm unity. The machine hesitated. The violent energy softened. For the first time in centuries, it felt harmony again. Not through a million voices, but through two souls that understood the beauty of silence. Light spread through the chamber, washing over everything. The pulse reversed. Across the galaxy, the chorus came back to life. Not as noise, but as a gentle hum, like the sound of wind over quiet oceans. Every being felt it. The peace, the balance, the silence within sound. When the light faded, Serene opened her eyes. The machine was still. The storm had passed. But Elias lay motionless beside her, his hand still resting on the crystal. Elias, she whispered, her voice trembling. For a long moment there was no response. Then slowly his eyes opened. He looked at her and smiled weakly. "You see," he said softly. "Silence isn't the end. It's just another way of speaking." Tears of light fell from her eyes, glowing as they touched his hand. She helped him stand, and together they watched as the core dimmed into peaceful rest. When they returned to the Concord, the galaxy rejoiced. The chorus had returned, not in the old way, but in a gentler form. Now silence and song existed together. Species learned to balance both, to speak when needed, to listen when silence spoke louder. Elias became a symbol of quiet strength, and Serene became the first Aelari to teach her people the art of human communication, through words, touch, and calmness. But their bond went deeper than words or songs. Sometimes, they stood together on the same balcony where they had first shared the stars. Serene would hum softly and Elias would close his eyes listening. He never interrupted. He never needed to say anything, and when her song ended, the silence that followed was full of meaning, full of peace, full of love. Years later, the Concord built a monument in their honor at the heart of the galaxy. It was called the Chamber of Stillness, a place where no sound was allowed and no telepathic thoughts were shared. Visitors came to stand there in silence, to remember the two beings who had saved the stars, not with war, not with words, but with understanding. At the center of the chamber stood a single inscription, written in both human and Aelari script. He loved her without words, and that silence spoke louder than forever. And beyond the monument, among the endless stars, the quiet voice of humanity continued to echo, gentle, patient, eternal.